Great. And we're going to jump right in if that is okay with everyone. So before I go on a big spiel about the Becoming a Better Mentor resource, it'll be even easier to watch the video, just under 2 minutes, about this resource and why it's important and why our colleagues at Mentor National, in partnership with amazing researchers and youth development professionals and organizations, created this. So I am going to press play, and of course, let me know if there's any issues with sound, etc.
Becoming a Better Mentor, Strategies to Be There for Young People was developed with you, the mentor, in mind. The information will help you fill your mentoring toolbox with helpful skills to be an even better mentor than you are. It offers guidance on topics such as effective online communication, cultivating youth voice, and practicing cultural humility, to name just a few. The introduction gives a brief overview of youth development and describes why having a mentoring mindset is important. Your work as a mentor is grounded in love and caring. It shows that you have a purpose beyond your own life and a desire to make the world a better place. We encourage you to embrace that idea and make it part of your identity. You are a mentor. That means a lot, especially at this moment in time. So, explore becoming a better mentor, and good luck on your mentoring journey. See the full resource at mentoring.org/bettermentor for more tips on how you can be a better mentor.
Awesome. So this resource, as you kind of just heard, is Mentor National's first resource that's directly written and for mentors. But we know, as the mentor affiliate and for those in the field, that this resource has a lot of potential utilizations about how you'll use it. So I'm actually going to launch a poll just to get an idea of who is here today, so we can talk a bit about how we can use and apply this resource. So I've launched the poll. You are able to click more than one if one of these applies to you. So my question is just, who's here today? Are you a mentor? Do you work at a mentoring program? Do you work at a youth program that doesn't necessarily have a formal mentoring process? Are you a teacher, or do you work with young people in some other capacity or are in relationship with young people? So I'll give another few minutes for that. We're about, y'all are on top of that. I love seeing the participation go up and up. We're at 65%. Wonderful. Y'all are moving. Love it, love it, love it. We're at 88%. We're so close. Can we make it? Can we get one more person? All right. Cool. So I'm not sharing the results. It looks like about half of us here are mentors, and the other half, work at a mentoring program or are with young people in some capacity. And you are exactly who I want to be here, and I am glad that you are. So for our mentoring programs, this is a resource that, potentially you could just pick up and hand to a mentor, right? But we know that you want to be in partnership with your mentors, create a community of learning for them as well. And this can be a resource that will allow you to do that. And for our mentors who are on the call, thank you for joining us. We love anybody who wants to become a better mentor, of course. So for our mentors, again, this is a pickup and a leisurely read for you, and to think about how it can apply to the context of your specific mentoring relationship. So I did drop the link in the chat. And when you go to this link, actually, let me open up the website so you can see. Right. So when you click that, you will be taken to the Becoming a Better Mentor page on Mentor National's website. And as you scroll down, here's that trailer we just watched. A little bit more information about the background, and as you can download the whole thing, it's 12 chapters. We will spend time today on each chapter topic, which is why we got to keep it moving. You'll be able to just download that as a PDF. The introductory webinar is there too for your review. And as you see, there is a video, and you can pull the chapters individually for each of the 12 chapters. There's a video for each chapter. We'll watch one of the videos later on, so you can really review it in as bite-sized as you need to. So bookmark that. We'll email it to you, of course, and I'm nonstop sharing it with everybody I know. So you can keep that open today if you want to follow along as we keep moving. But that's kind of the context of what we're talking about and what we're going to review. This whole series, we're kicking it off talking about this resource, and we'll have 2 more sessions, which we'll talk more about at the end, that kind of bookend these topics and give you a little bit of opportunity to go deeper. But today, we're going to go over each of the 12 topics that are addressed in this session or in this resource, and how we can kind of get those conversations started. Here we go. Okay, so I'm about to launch another poll, and this is a self-assessment. So whatever your relationship is to mentoring or any relationships you have with a young person, this little poll is an opportunity for you to kind of reflect on that and take the time to kind of see how it's going and do a check-in. No one will see your personal results or your answers, so be honest. And there's 10 questions and 1 question for just about every one of the chapters. 2 of the chapters I left out because I wasn't sure if they would apply to everyone. So I'm going to launch that now. Oh, okay, here we go. Okay. And then you'll see on the screen, there's just some helpful definitions if you're not familiar, because these are mentioned in a few of the questions. So I will give you, I'll give you about 2 minutes to complete this. Take your time. I'll turn on some tunes and we will share our results together. And I want you to see, as we go over the results and you have the experience of filling this out, we will continue to kind of refer back to our own experiences being mentors. So I'll give you some time to do that. Let me know if you have any issues with the poll. We'll give another minute. About a third of everybody has completed. Don't feel the need. Again, your answers are really for you. We'll look at the group's results overall, but it's really about the experience of taking the time to reflect on these questions as it pertains to you and your relationship with a young person, whether that's a formal mentoring match or whether that is program staff member to program member, etc. About halfway through participation. I'll give it another 30 seconds or so. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to give 10 more seconds. All right. We're about 75% participation. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results for us to review together. Great. And again, we'll go over each of these topics throughout today, but how well do you provide emotional support for your empathy? It seems like most of us are feeling pretty good about it. And for those who need improvement, please know that this is not a space where I'm judging you or that anybody needs to be judging each other. The fact that you're here is what counts, and that we're going to leave with some learning today. So I'm glad that people are feeling good about that. As far as practicing cultural humility, needs improvement, looking good there. And we'll learn a lot more about that in one of our follow-up sessions as well. Is there Time in your mentoring is for fun and play. Seems pretty good, but I always say there's never enough time for play for sure. Let me know your reactions to these results in the chat or how it felt to complete these. So are you conscious and intentional with how you communicate with your mentee? Mostly good, great. Seems we need improvement in meaningful connections with other supportive adults in our mentees' lives. Unconditional positive regard. Most of the time, all of the time, that's great to see. We'll talk about kind of some social activism stuff there for question 7. We'll talk about goal setting as well, but it seems you all are on a good track. Needing improvement for motivating your mentee away from negative behaviors. I think that's a growth area always for everyone, for any adult. And we'll talk about social capital as well. Great. Thank you all for taking an honest moment to do some of that self-reflection. We really appreciate it. And again, I want you just, as we go over these topics, to just kind of think about how you felt prepared or unprepared to answer those questions, and what you're learning that you could potentially use for an area of improvement. So I will say the first few slides of this are going to be a little video heavy, and that's only because if I know that someone else is an expert on something and can say it even better, I'm going to let them do it. So the first chapter of Becoming a Better Mentor is about providing emotional support and empathy, which I would say is, the starting point and the foundational area of a relationship. So the main takeaway being, working to understand your mentee's experiences from their point of view can improve their reception of your support and greaten your impact. So we know that empathy ensures a higher quality relationship and level of trust. But what exactly is empathy and how do we do it? So that's when I'm going to cue up this video. Let me know your reactions in the chat. Some of you may have seen this. It is very popular, but when I find that people haven't seen it, I'm like, you gotta see this. So I'm going to share that now. Let me know what you're thinking in the chat.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Yes. So I think that video is just such a good, pardon me, such a good personification of what empathy is and how we practice it and how often we accidentally don't do it because that's easy to do. And I think for most of us here, we're familiar and you all are great at doing this. And again, this is not to suggest that anyone here needs to or is doing badly or anything of the type, but that when we think about it and remind ourselves about what does it really mean to provide support and empathy, we're able to reflect on it and act on it. So I'm also going to drop a link. This is just a video. This is a TikTok. I want to be honest. This is a TikTok I saw earlier today. And they're interviewing young people who had experienced a loss and what they don't like to hear from adults and what they do like to hear from adults. It's, just like a minute long. It's definitely worth a watch when we think about empathy, and especially when we know our young people are going through something that is tough, like grief. So I'm just going to leave that there as a resource for you. So we're going to dive next into cultural humility, which is that essential continuous self-reflection to seek opportunities to learn about your mentee and their cultural identity and their experiences, and to learn about yourselves as well. So I am going to, again, the Becoming a Better Mentor video about this is perfect and says it better than I ever could. But I will say we'll be diving deeper into this topic in our second training in this series, which we'll talk more about at the end. But I am going to hit this, and let me know your reflections and thoughts in the chat. I'll give you guys a chance to share them as well. And this is our last video.
Becoming a better mentor. Strategies to be there for young people. Practicing cultural humility. Cultural humility is an ongoing, lifelong process of self-reflection and learning about how social identity and experiences are shaped by systems of oppression, power, and privilege. Social identity is a person's sense of who they are based on their group membership, which can reflect physical, social, and mental characteristics and can be self-claimed or ascribed by others. Everyone has multiple social identities. As such, cultural humility is important in all mentoring relationships, even if mentors and mentees are similar in important characteristics, like race or gender, because there are likely many other ways that they differ. Cultural humility is grounded in continuous self-reflection. This involves asking questions about and exploring the many ways you define yourself. For example, your race, gender, class, ability, sexuality, and religion, and what those identities mean in the context of the power structures in the United States. Cultural humility also involves an ongoing process of learning about your mentee. Actively seek opportunities to learn about your mentee's culture and, when warranted and invited, to participate in that culture. You may also explore how systems of oppression and privilege shape your mentee's experiences. The more you understand this, the more you will be able to offer meaningful support. Cultural humility is not cultural competence, which many people confuse. Cultural competence assumes that there is an endpoint in learning, that you can simply observe and read about another culture, then you are done. This attitude could lead mentors to be overconfident in their relationships with youth. Cultural humility is also not colorblindness. Some Americans grew up believing that seeing race is a form of prejudice and discrimination in and of itself, and even mentioning a person's race is racist. Colorblindness creates a discomfort around individuals who are racially different from you because they may feel that they can't bring their full self into a relationship. You can start building your cultural humility by reflecting on questions such as, how do my social identities shape my worldview and experiences? How have systems of privilege and oppression shaped my own identities and experiences? How do I make space in my mentoring interactions for my mentee to express their own identities? Committing and actively engaging in a process of ongoing self-reflection and learning about your own social identity is the key in being a mentor who is culturally humble. See the full chapter at mentoring.org/bettermentor for more tips on how you can be a better mentor.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections, but I think the video does a great job of explaining what cultural humility is and some of the action items and questions that you can do in that self-reflection they're encouraging you to do as you move forward in your mentoring relationship, as well as, in general, and how we relate to other people who are different than us or not. I say too, and kind of advice that I give, that when we may be of what we believe to be, culturally similar to our mentee, that one, we don't make assumptions, and two, again, that this is part of, we're talking about our, our own identities first and reflecting on those. So we're able to have that relation to our mentee and see what possible power dynamics there are, etc. But again, if you think you are of cultural similarity, that let your mentee tell you what their traditions are, what it looks like for them, and what their experience is too. The last time I was talking about becoming a better mentor with adults, I reminded that the experiences for our young people today are different than ours, even if they were exactly like us, personality, culturally, and grew up in the same exact place. The world is different now. So we want to trust that our mentees are the experts of their own lives, and that when we do this self-reflection too, it's encouraging them to as well. And we also know, and research indicates, that this kind of cultural exploration and self-cultural exploration is particularly important for youth of color. So these are conversations that, we want to get started, and a mentoring relationship is a great place to have those conversations. And yeah, we hope that we again, tooled with even more information that is in this chapter, chapter 2 of the resource, that this can be a great opportunity for conversation, help potentially overcome those barriers of mistrust. And again, we will be going deeper dive on this topic in our second session of this series, which is going to be about combating white saviorism. So I hope you will join us for that. Yeah, so chapter 3 is all about making room for fun and play. It seemed that you all were doing pretty good, mostly on opportunities to have fun with your mentee. And this is really about something as simple as joy. And I would love if you drop in the chat something fun you've done with your mentee lately, maybe something unique, maybe something your mentee just loves, or feel free to raise your hand and come off mute. This is really about the joy, finding joy in your mentee's engagement in the activity. And then also, this is the opportunity to engage in an activity that brings you joy, and sharing that with your mentee. So I'd love to hear some firsthand experiences for those of you who are getting enough playtime with your mentee, just about how that's going. Yeah, Dominic says you played the original Nintendo. Wow. I was curious if they would be good with those old square remotes. My mentee loves charades. Kids love charades. It's such I feel like an old timey, I say old timey because it's a game you can like play without electricity, but kids love it. They were not good, but loved it. That's awesome. And that's, again, so sharing something from your experience with them in the form of play is such a nice way to get to know each other and build that rapport as well. Yeah. Hopscotch. Again, those old school games, so fun. Wonderful. So again, some of the reasons to invest in, fun and play with your mentee is that we want to talk about equalizing the power imbalance. When you're playing a game, you're on the same level, right? You're either in the same competition with each other, or you're on a team. And again, that kind of does a lot of equalizing there. It also forms bridges to transcend your differences, right? Kids are used to, having their recess and playing with whoever's out there, and they could be more open in those places because they're kind of have their guard down and are ready to play. It also provides an opportunity to be a safe haven for your mentee. Maybe they're not able to get a lot of fun and play in the other areas of their lives, and they know when they get to spend time with you, they get to have fun and kind of chill out. And we find the research says that the amount of play is also an indicator in long-term engagement in a mentoring relationship. So I think this is an investment you can continue to, build in on across the length of your relationship that will keep you connected as things change. So I guess we did self-esteem bingo, went to the science center, had a little spa day. Awesome. And I think, again, this is an opportunity to let your mentee tell you what they like to do and what they're into, and for you to share your own interests in fun and play as well. Awesome. Thank you, guys. So next we're going to talk about attunement. And could somebody actually read the definition of attunement for me as it's written on the screen?
You want the one that says attunement? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this text that's in red.
Okay, I'll read it then. Since
Thanks, Kezia.
attunement is a term we use to describe a set of communication strategies employed by a support provider to facilitate relationship connection and create a sense that the recipient feels heard and seen.
Yes. So this is chapter 4, and this goes back to that question in the poll about how intentional we are with our communication. So one, we start with that self-awareness of how we are showing up to our mentoring sessions. When I used to train new mentors who had not even, met their mentees yet, I said, as the adult, it is your job to be consistent in how you show up, and that you have some more of that self-control when we talk about walking into a room, and that kids can be unpredictable and the like. So that idea that when you show up, a mentee is able to predict how you may act, how you may react, and how you will communicate with them so they can build their capacity to communicate well with you. And then again, the benefits of doing that is this sense that a mentee feels heard and seen. Now, I would love to hear in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand, like who, I think we all remember, the first person, maybe our first mentor who really made us feel heard and seen. And we find, in research in mental health and mentoring relationships, et cetera, that this is essentially what people want from relationships, to be heard and seen. So again, that self-awareness of how we're communicating and getting to know our mentee, so we're able to communicate in a way that works for them. This also, a lot of things we're talking about are going to look different over the course of, how old your mentee is, a younger mentee versus an older mentee. And I keep coming to the defense of teenagers and how, physiologically their brains make it very hard for them to communicate, and that takes different skills. So again, all of these skills we're talking about today are skills we continue to develop and hone. So from what we know about practicing this attunement is that mentoring relationships are stronger. It improves a mentee's engagement in school. As mentors read mentees' cues and quote unquote meet them where they are, which I'm sure is something you've heard a lot in programs preach a lot, they share ideas and decision making, and devoting that intentional effort to hearing ideas from your mentee can be really impactful. So we want to, again, have that opportunity for them in your communication with your mentee, that you're able to, build on your mentee's ideas and hear what they're really thinking. And I will say, as someone who, the last program I was working with elementary schoolers who like to say, oh, I don't know, I don't have any ideas, this, that, and the other. Just that patience to be able to to wait and to do that kind of coaxing and communication. So we want to keep that in mind. Again, those considerations, the context, if you're with a program, the context of that program, the developmental considerations of how old your mentee is, and then also the timing in your relationship cycle. If this is the beginning of your relationship, you're doing a lot of awareness, and you may feel like you're not in sync yet, and that is normal. As you get more attuned into your relationship and time passes, those things will become easier, and you'll get better at it as well. Wonderful. So we're going to talk next about online communication. And I know that there's been a pandemic, I heard, the past 2 years. And a lot of mentoring programs alike have moved online, and maybe some now are still doing online communication. So I'd love to hear in the chat if you want to come off mute, if your program did you go online for a period of the past few years, or do you still have an online component, and how everybody kind of feels about how online communication is going now.
Hi. We didn't, I didn't go online. However, because I partner, well, I'm a contractor for the Montgomery County Rec Department, we would meet up at like different places and did projects outside throughout, but we did not go online because of the confidentiality. So we just met and we did major, like great projects with the girls, and we partner with other groups as well, but we never went online, but we're back in schools now.
Great, yeah, and I think too, for a lot of programs, they're coming out of that transition of going from online to in-person. So there's a few things to consider when we talk about online communication. One, as it says on the screen, our young people are digital natives, and how they interact with the internet is different than how we do as adults or as people who have access to the kind of internet we have now later in life. So we want to think about that as we're considering what communication tools we're going to use, and kind of the positives and negatives of the different modes of online communication, because there's lots of different versions. I'll say for our program people who are potentially going hybrid or trying to figure out how to do online, online connection better, because there is to say, as much as these past 2 years, we've all been wanting to be more in person, and even now as well, I think there's been this assumed bias that we can't have meaningful connections online, and that's just not true. Again, for everything we're talking about today, it is about that intentionality. For programs, there are tons of considerations to consider, to think about, of course, with confidentiality and the like Hessia mentioned. So if this is something that you'd like to, as a program, learn more about and how to implement into your program, I strongly encourage you to apply for technical assistance, e-mentoring or virtual mentoring as it's called, and as there's much research about. There is lots of data to say that we can have meaningful relationships online when we are intentional about it. So I would say don't rule it out. Anything to stay connected for sure in these crazy times. So again, if that's something you'd like to learn more about in the context of your specific program, I strongly encourage you to sign up for technical assistance. Great. So group interactions. And the question I'm going to have for you all, for one, who here facilitates groups of youth, or their mentoring program is set up to have multiple youth working with multiple students, or one adult with multiple young people. But facilitating group interaction is the art of making it easy for a group of young people to interact and work together to achieve a goal. So we know that groups can provide young people with a sense of belonging to something important, to feeling engaged, to feeling emotionally safe, which sometimes it does not feel like it's very easy to make those spaces, but a good group facilitator can help to build those spaces, at least to be emotionally safer, and for young people to feel like they have a space to contribute. So I'm going to drop this question in the chat as well. But if you think back to your own experiences growing up, what was a group that you were a part of as a young person that benefited your growth, that made you feel belong, that you had something to contribute, that you felt engaged in, that you felt safe in? I'd love to hear about your experiences, because I guarantee you they will be parallel with our young people who are a part of groups today. Might go 4-H, Interact, Rotaract. Yes, 4-Hers, I feel like, in my area where I grew up, 4-Hers were life is just something you did for a very long time. And I had that experience too, being a part of different sports teams for for years and years and years. Church youth group, yes, that was a group I was a part of as well, which was where I met my mentor as a teenager. Yeah, feel free to continue to share it in the chat, but just some of those. Oh, brownies and Girl Scouts. Ooh, I was a Girl Scout too. Yeah. Volleyball, sports teams. I mean, we always talk about, the value of things like sports, and it's not just about, the spirit of competition, et cetera, and learning skills, but it's about that group and being part of that group identity. Those are one of those social identities that we were talking about earlier. Being a part of the sports team can be something like that. So that is really great opportunity, and why we also want to include people like coaches in trainings like this and opportunities like this, because coaches is a form of mentoring. Mentors can coach and coaches can mentor. Great, track team too. Awesome. So again, this chapter will go the deeper dive on everything I'm about to say, but some of those good group facilitation, skills are making sure that expectations for the group are clear. I would say in any interaction with a young person, the clearer the expectations are, the higher opportunities for success. Recognizing, the predictable stages that groups go through, and the book does this chapter does a really great job of talking about, the forming of the group, the storming, the norming, performing, a journey. If you had not heard of that acronym, it's really, really useful, and especially if you know that your group is cyclical and that you're going to have an end date that you meet, you're able to go through that whole life cycle of a group and support all your young people through it. And good group facilitation includes recognizing when it's working, giving credit where credit is due, giving your group accolades when they deserve it, and when things are going well. And then, of course, tailoring your group activities to the age group of the members. So, of course, age group considerations will apply to all of these, but especially within a group. And if the age is not consistent throughout the group, considering the learning we have around peer mentoring and how to facilitate that as well. So if anybody has a great group interaction story they'd like to share, please feel free to come off mute or drop in the chat. I know this isn't something that all mentoring programs do, but I do find that kind of I want to say it's a trend, but kind of the trend of group mentoring is on the rise. And there is, research and data about it. And I'll share lots of documents with you all in my follow-up email. I'm going to apologize for that now, but there is a growing trend of group mentoring because there are so many benefits to doing it. So being skilled at facilitating those group interactions can be really important. Wonderful. So chapter 7 is about working with other people in the relationship system. So I think when we think about the history of mentoring, and even often how mentoring is portrayed in the media, in like literal media, film, TV shows, etc., or just in the narrative, is that, kids who need a mentor are kids who don't have relationships with other caring adults. And that's just not true. And that is a narrative that, especially here at Mentor Maryland, DC, that we are trying to disrupt. The fact of the matter is that mentoring is for all young people, and all young people can benefit from mentoring. And the other fact is, hint, hint, and I'm sure a lot of you know this, that any adults who participate in mentoring will get some of those benefits too. So we want to acknowledge that there are other caring adults in a young person's life, and a mentor can be another added person in that child's village. If we're saying, it takes a village to be able to be in relationship, and that in your role as mentor, you have the opportunity to connect and collaborate with these other caring adults to support your young person. So for those of you who may be program staff, or you mentor within a program, I'd like to hear about, does your program permit or encourage interactions with parents or with teachers or with, again, that young person's extended network? Why or why not? I mean, for example, a mentoring program that I was working with, we were a site-based mentoring. So mentors came to the site to visit the young people. So there's really limited opportunities for mentors to interact with parents unless parents came to the site. And really all interactions outside of the program were outside of our liability scope. So unfortunately, we couldn't actively encourage them. And that was the nature of the program. So then it became on us to, create opportunities for mentors to connect with parents. But it can be a tricky thing. So for, again, those of you associated with programs, does your program permit and encourage interactions with parents and other adults? Why or why not? And if so, how is your program doing it? And how is that going? I'd love to hear. And I think our other, your colleagues on this call would love to hear some of those experiences. Yes, Kelly says, we feel if we get to know the parents or support people in youth life, they will endorse the relationship and encourage youth to stay in the program. Yes, again, all of these things that we're talking about today are those investments for the longevity of a youth in a program or in a mentoring relationship. So yes. Wonderful. Gabrielle, we hold mentoring engagement meetings, bringing together mentor, mentee, and caregivers. Yes, wonderful. The few times that I was able to do that, we would usually do it during National Mentoring Month or at parent engagement events. You know, parents were delighted to interact with mentors. And for mentors, again, as is written on the screen, it can help mentors understand to more of that context of the mentee and be able to potentially communicate better with your mentee. Learning about what's important and what are the priorities and the values of a child's caregivers, of their teachers, of the other people in your mentee's life, and aligning expectations with them as well. Yes, yeah. Right, there's no interaction with parents unless you're a part of an event or open house of schools. Yeah. So again, when we talk about for our program people, and I was one of you, I want you to know I truly relate. Managing parent relationships and relationships with families enough is a bucket of work. Nevertheless, your relationship with your mentors that serve the youth in your program, and it is a lot of work to bring those people together. So I want you to know, for those of you who are doing that work, that it is worth it, and it's important, and we really appreciate it on the mentor side. If you are a mentor and you are a part of your program and your program doesn't have, those opportunities for you, communicate that's something that you're interested in, or even, and it might not be, maybe they can set up a phone call or some other way for you to connect. And it can also help, clarify boundaries, because we want to be reminding of our new mentors who are coming in and want to help people that mentors are not meant to replace a parent, to replace a teacher, or to replace, a guardian or a caregiver. So we want to be mindful of that as well, that, mentors have their own role in this kind of circle of adults that we want young people everywhere to have. Wonderful. All right, so I'm just going to drop the link again since we have some new people who are still coming in. Welcome, everyone. So we are on we're about to move to chapter 8. So we're talking about honoring youth voice and building power. So adults interested in elevating youth voice must learn how to listen critically and be willing to take a step back and share power with young leaders. So of course, one day these young people are going to be ruling the world and be leading all of us. So we want to encourage them along the way. Excuse me. So this quotation on the screen is from the developmental relationship framework. For that framework, it's youth development framework that some of you may be familiar with. We've done professional developments about it in the past, and I love sharing it with mentors because it's so valuable. But one of the elements of that framework is about sharing power and building power. It starts to share power, and then youth can build their own power. So part of a way to do that is about encouraging voice. So inviting young people to share their thoughts and opinions and provide feedback. So with that intentional communicating we talked about earlier, we're also talking about that intentional listening as well. And remind them that their voices are important for our program staff. Let youth know that their voice can influence the program by asking for their feedback, for their thoughts, and for their ideas. And taking their ideas seriously is a really, really important part of that. And that, of course, is something, again, we have to think about what's age appropriate. For our little guys, they might not be ready for too much power. And should we give our kindergartners the power to rule the nation? Probably not. But we want to be thinking about your role as a mentor and as a knowledgeable navigator to that young person. You want to be non-judgmental sounding board. Your goal is to affirm your mentee, to support and encourage them. And that is the foundation to developing young people to have confidence in their voice, and to eventually, our hope, of course, is that they can affect positive change and encourage positive change in the things that they care about. And how can they make change if they don't even know what they care about, or if you don't know what they care about? When we talk later about goal setting and the like, we want to know about what our mentees care about so we can help them to use their power and their voice as productively as possible. So I'll say, this goes back to our question in the poll about unconditional positive regard, because when you have unconditional positive regard, excuse me, it helps your mentee feel more comfortable to share their voice, because they know that you will always listen and affirm that they are worthy and valuable. So I ask you all, pardon me, who had unconditional positive regard for you when you were growing up? And I want to say someone outside of a parent, an adult in your life, maybe your first mentor, maybe a teacher who had unconditional positive regard for you, and how that impacted you. I'll say for me, so my first mentor was the leader of our church youth group. And, he was somebody who definitely built power in me because he asked for my help. And then he collaborated with me to do things, to plan events and things like that. And I had literally been so disempowered that I had no idea that young people could do things and that adults needed our help, or that, that I had that opportunity to contribute. And this person continues to be somebody who has unconditional positive regard for me today. And that still means a lot. So I'd love to hear from a few people in the chat or come off mute, who had unconditional positive regard for you growing up. Oh, I feel like it's your third grade teacher. She's last grade made her feel like she was worthy. Yes, and that's what unconditional positive regard is, that reaffirming that the young person is worthy. And the mentee will always feel that despite where your conversations may go, which we're going to come back to unconditional positive regard in a few chapters as well. So yeah, who had unconditional positive regard for you growing up? What was the impact of that? It's worth thinking about. I know that it's a personal share as well. And I hope you had that person. And if you didn't, well, now, you're a mentor, you are in relationship with young people, you can do that for other people. And I'll say too, I was inspired by that because I really had not felt that until I met that mentor. And once I met that mentor, I realized how important mentoring was, literally. And I made a commitment at the age that I met him, I was about 17, 18, that I would be a mentor to someone else. So again, unconditional positive regard. If you haven't started it yet, you can start tomorrow. So wonderful. So we're now on chapter 9 for those who are following along in the resource. So you can see how building youth voice and building power, translate into this. And like I said, every chapter of this book feeds into another chapter or all the chapters. So wherever your investment goes, it will pay off in another skill. So we're talking about building critical consciousness, which refers to the abilities of individuals, specifically young people in this case, to critically understand social conditions, feel empowered to change those conditions. So we've just built that power. Now they're empowered to change their conditions and to take actions to improve the world around them. So we like to be clear that youth power building is not about rendering adults useless, but about centering young people and positioning adults as supporters and resources rather than leaders. So I know we have leaders on this call, program leaders and the like, and this is about, again, inviting young people to be a part of that leadership as you lead your program and create your program and shape your program. And as at this point, we've let youth know that we value their voice. We've helped them feel more empowered and build their own power. And now your next step is, what do adults need to do in this situation? Be aware of this, have that self-awareness, be aware of concepts like adultism and the like, and the judgments we make against young people, as a society, but as an individual as well. Listen, truly listen. We're talking about intentional communication, but again, that intentional listening is so, so important. And then lastly, get out of the way. Because again, our young people have the power to change their communities. And we know this from, our young activists that we see across the world, and March for Our Lives and Greta Thunberg, and these young people who are changing the world, literally. And the best thing that we adults can do is to get out of the way and be a support rather than forcing them to shape into what we tell them we should be. So I want to ask, what issues have your young people expressed that they care about? And if you don't know, is it because maybe you didn't ask, or maybe this isn't coming up in conversation? But I guarantee you, when you give young people the opportunity to express their point of view, that they will share. So feel free to drop that in chat or raise your hand and come off mute. But I'll give an example. If you're with us for our Black Mental Health Forum in February, we had a panel of young people talking about how much they cared about mental health, and they were mental health advocates in the community. And it was amazing. I'm pretty sure the video is on our YouTube channel. Check it out. But again, when we give those young people the platform, they will tell you. If you've made the space that they know that if they talk, you will listen, they promise they will tell you. Yes, yeah, I see your hand up. You share.
One of the things that I know that, they constantly talk about is their friends may, families may be deported, or, the identification, or that they're homeless because they don't have identification, just the concerns of immigration. All of that is their concern. I hear a lot of them, because they may lose their friends.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's so serious of them to share, because we know that there's risk to sharing things like that. And they obviously feel vulnerable in that situation. So again, this is about how we're listening to youth voices, we're building that power that they can do something, and we're acting as a resource of what they can do with that power to influence change and to influence systems. So again, I really encourage you to make space in your program for that, because again, these young people will be leaving the world soon. We need their help. We know we need their help. Joey said, youth at Attunement did a presentation on their own about substance abuse and misuse. Wonderful. And they did it on their own. And let me tell you, they wouldn't have just created a presentation on their own if they didn't think anyone would listen. So that's a great example of that it was happening, that they had created that safe space, that they had that positive regard, that they were like, hey, I care about this. I'm going to make a presentation about it. And I know the adults here will listen. So that's wonderful to hear. And again, we know that at these young ages, youth can become really invested in certain issues in their communities. And now more than ever, youth are politically active and socially active. And my husband's a teacher, and he's like, wow, like he's so impressed with how open and accepting kids are compared to our experiences growing up. So again, if we get out of the way and we listen and we give platforms and share our platforms with young people, they will have wonderful and amazing things to say. And it's really exciting. Awesome. So moving on to chapter 10. So I remember in our poll, a lot of people were super on track with goal setting, and that is wonderful. For our programs who are on and people who are part of programs, I know that like I've only worked in youth development my entire career, and I've never worked anywhere where goal setting like wasn't part of the services we provided to youth and families. It's just like funders want to hear about it. It's just something parents want to hear about it. It is something that's really kind of like totally aligned with mentoring relationships. We know that high quality mentoring relationships, support a young person's confidence in their goal setting ability and their goal directed skills. So again, as it says on the screen, intentionally supporting your mentee through the process of setting goals and pursuing goals is a really important way that you can guide them to discovering their passions and purpose. And we've talked about some of that, purpose and issues in their community. Again, all these things are connected, and that the mentor is you, the mentor, again, is about being a guide and a resource. So I'll say for those of you who are following along in the resource, this chapter has extremely wonderful, explicit directions and resources, kind of diagrams and the like of how to do some of this goal setting. So you'll see here, it talks about the kind of these 4 overarching strategies. So the goal selection, how a mentee comes to decide what their goal is, the pursuit of strategies, deciding, how they go about achieving this goal, achieving the goal, the best part, and then shifting gears. So, that means adapting when things go wrong or off kilter, and being flexible to do that. So again, you can be that guide along the way, along this map. And then, excuse me, these 6 strategies here are research-based, work for all age groups, but it's about helping that young person select and prioritize a set of meaningful, realistic, and specific goals, SMART goals and the like. Make and stick to a detailed step-by-step plan, make those things actionable and bite-sizable and achievable. Stay focused and showing persistent effort using those strategies. And again, you're that guide along the way, helping them figure out what those strategies are and encouraging them to be persistent, etc. Keeping track of the goal's progress and how strategies are working, again, or whether we need to shift gears. Seeking help from others. So helping your mentee know who they can ask for help. Hopefully you're the mentor, but hopefully you're not the only person that they can reach out to. So letting them know who are encouraging them to identify who are adults and who they might be able to seek help from. And then lastly, substituting strategies when the first choice strategies are not working well. Again, that's shifting gears. So you as the mentor, again, you are the support along the goal. We're not forcing goals. Again, I'll say this a lot, and it's from a social worker I used to work with. People are the experts of their own lives, and young people are too, except they're not quite as good at communicating about it, which is why we have to do that intentional communication and listening. So we know that goals help young people make sense of their world and give them kind of power and agency, helps them meet their needs in the face of changing demands and opportunities, and promote their own positive development, which is why goal setting is so ubiquitous in the youth development field and in the mentoring field. Again, if you have a story to share, but this chapter 10, has some of the most actionable, pull-outable for my program folks, for you to share with new mentors or for young people that you are trying to encourage to reach a goal and decide what their goals are. Some really, really great takeaways that you can just immediately implement on how to do that effectively. So it's a really great chapter. I'm a huge, huge fan of it. Wonderful. We have 2 chapters left, and then we will go into a breakout and you guys will kind of have some time to debrief. So this is the tough one, conversations about behavior change. And I think in our poll, it seemed that there was a fair amount who needed improvement. So, excuse me. Why this is difficult is that we know that these kind of conversations can potentially just be disruptive to a relationship. And yes, this guide is downloadable now, Linda. Just saw your message. Let me drop that in the chat so you can follow along. Yes, so you can download here, and we are on chapter 11. Great. So this chapter outlines motivational interviewing for those who may not be aware, but this is some more intentional communication and can be a resource to you when we're talking about having these kinds of quote unquote tough conversations. And before we get into how to do this, we need to do some of that self-reflection first. So being aware that any attempt to right a behavior coming from you potentially is going through a lens of bias about your experiences and your expectations. This is really, again, we want to start with a lot of listening, which is what motivational interviewing is all about. So we want to ensure that if we're talking about behavior change, that we are considering our own biases and whether we're prepared for the conversation with that young person about something that they might not want to hear, or that their reaction is something that you don't want to hear. So for those of you who are mentors or working with young people, tell me some of the challenges that you all have around these kind of conversations, because I know they exist and it's just the nature of working with young people. So yeah, tell me or if you feel comfortable sharing, please share, some of your general areas of improvement as far as conversations about behavior change. So the foundation of this concept is about creating an atmosphere of acceptance that involves communicating and unconditional positive appraisal, unconditional positive regard to your mentee's worth and value. When your mentee knows that they can count on you to treat them with respect, to treat them with dignity, to treat them with kindness, they will feel more comfortable sharing potentially the things you don't want to hear or to hosting these conversations. When we talk about changing a behavior, it can trigger like, oh, this person doesn't like me, this person, it can make them, again, feel some vulnerability in that relationship. But when a mentee is affirmed in your relationship with them, that you think they're worthy and valuable regardless, that it again creates that atmosphere where these conversations are a little bit easier. Drishes, trauma that engulfs lives makes them struggle to be in the present. Yes, absolutely. It's just struggle because they're struggling with a hierarchy of needs and a stressful home life. Yeah, and again, that there are stresses beyond our control, and that is why, of course, as a mentee, and potentially you're spending 1 hour a week, maybe more, your mentees have whole lives outside of their relationship with you that you may not know about, which is why we want to do some of that listening first when we're talking about motivational interviewing and the like. So, and the other side of that is that when we talk about having that unconditional positive regard in that kind of atmosphere, regardless of the choice your mentee makes, they know they can count on you to accept them as you are. And you can accept the choice they make. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with it. That is difficult. Of course, it's not easy to do, which is why it's a chapter of this book, of this resource, and something that's worth spending time into doing and considering. I'll share a quick story of a young man that I used to mentor. I was called to his school because he had been suspended. And I, went to the front office, spoke with an administrator who would let me know that, what my mentee had done, which he had hit another student, and I was driving him home. And so I said, hey, what happened? And he just told me the whole story. Like, no nonsense, straight to it, no denying of what the truth was. And he didn't know whether the administrator had talked to me or not. He was not present for that conversation. He just went in right into the truth. And it's because, I had let him know in the previous, those foundational, every meeting, you're again investing into that relationship. I had created a space where he knew that he could tell me and I would still like him, and that I would still come and spend time with him, and we would do all the things that we always did together. And I loved that about him. And I loved that about our relationship, that we were able to be honest. And of course, I wasn't like, great job hitting that kid. But, he told me the truth, and we talked about it, and we were able to talk about what to do next time instead. And that, we make mistakes and how to come out of that. So that was really rewarding for me as a mentor when that happened, and something I'll never forget. And I wish that kind of situation for all of you. And again, it does take that intentional work in those kind of foundational, the beginning of the relationship, the middle, end. And all this work that we're talking about doing, it is at every possible interaction you have with your mentee that you can kind of build and invest into that work. Awesome. All right. So lastly, and this is chapter 12, talking about expanding networks of support. So we've talked about this larger, the mentoring relationship system, the other people that are already in a youth life that you can collaborate with. But here we're talking about that social capital question that was in that poll. So social capital being, I'm going to go back real quick to that definition. Here we go. The social capital, the resources, information, support, and opportunities that we have through our social interactions and relationship network. Resources, information, support, opportunities that we have through our social interactions and relationship network. So the fact of the matter is, because young people are young, their resources, networks, etc., are smaller. These are things that we grow as we get older, as we have job experiences, as we have life experiences. And we want to, as mentors, encourage our young person to expand their network of support, but also what can we do as a mentor to bring in networks of support and help them expand their possibilities, expand their network beyond the mentoring system. So we want to not only expand their social capital, which we'll talk a bit about how you can do that, but also develop their capacity to identify and reach out to supportive adults. So because the fact of the matter is that unfortunately, we may not all be in a relationship with our mentee forever and ever and ever and ever. And even so, we want our mentee, when they're in situations where we're not there to give that immediate support, for them to know and feel comfortable and feel empowered and feel their voices to connect with other adults when they need that help, guidance, and support. So some of the kind of actionable ways to do this is to, one, get to know your mentee. What is your mentee interested in the long term? What resources can you bring in for them to learn about that thing, etc.? Help your mentee identify and reach out to existing support. So a lot of mentees, we know they have caring adults in their lives, but they may not realize that that person will be there for them if they ask them to show up, and encouraging them to have those conversations. Connecting your mentee with services, with programs, with other resources that are in their community, and ensuring that they have the things that they need. And that might not be something that you're doing alone, again, right? This would be something that you're doing in that mentoring relationship system, and that you're feeling connected with those people. Connecting your mentee with people from your own social network. So who in your network, relates to an interest of your mentee that you can introduce them to. And again, that we're kind of transferring that social capital to our mentees. Then, of course, helping your mentee develop a positive relationship with their own peers as well. So we want them to have, relationships with the caring adults in their lives, of course, but also we know that their classmates and the people in their programs, etc., have lots of things to share and to grow and to collaborate with as well. So we want to ensure that they have those connections. Wonderful. So we are doing great on time. And this is what I want us to do next. So I'm going to move us all into breakout rooms, and we'll have a good 10 minutes. But just think back to your self-assessment, to an area where you felt like you could have done some growing. And then in your breakout rooms, discuss something that you've learned that you can apply to grow in this area of your mentoring relationship. So let me quickly drop that into the chat so you have that to share on deck. 1 second. Okay. So that's in the chat. I'm going to break us out just for 10 minutes so you all can get to know each other. And I know in the past few calls that I've been on that people have really been enjoying connecting with each other. So we're going to break out into those rooms. And again, thinking back to that self-assessment, what's an area of growth? And now knowing what we know, what will you do to grow in?